there are many different reasons why an exercise might not be working for you. Now, you might leap straight to the fact that it's a shit exercise. Therefore, I'm not doing it. It's not really working for me. I want to do something else. Change my program, coach, peasant. Bring me back something that fucking works, bitch. Now, that might not be the case. Now, I've got three things for you, which could be the reason why you are struggling with any form of exercise. Now, I like to bring this back to the 1990s. Let me tell you a story. Now, in the 1990s, I was just over about 10 years old, 1991, 1992. Metallica just released the Black Album. Arguably, by that time, one of the most famous, seminal metal albums of all time, possibly. I'm going to get some Metallica hatred in the comments, maybe. Now, in that particular making of that album, there was a famous scene, well, it's famous amongst people who have seen it, where Kirk Hammett, the guitarist, he is trying to get a solo for one of the main songs on the album. He's trying to write a cool solo and make it sound amazing and fit the song and all that sort of stuff. So he messes around with some shit and it sounds fucking awful. Now, Bob Rock, who was the producer at the time, turns to the camera while Kirk is out the room and says he's worked with many different people, many different musicians, and if they haven't done their homework, they always come back and say, it's this sound, man. It's just not working for me. Lo and behold, Kirk walks back in, fucks up another solo multiple times over and says that exact sentence. Now, this is kind of like where a lot of people get to with their exercise. If they haven't done their homework when it comes to the form or understanding how the setup of that exercise should work or how to execute it or how to really extract the most out of that specific exercise for them, they immediately jump to, well, this exercise just doesn't work for me, man. And it's the exercise's fault. Now, sometimes the exercise doesn't fit you, and we'll come on to that. But there are other options as well and other reasons why you might be struggling with exercise. So we're going to run through three of those with some tips on how you can actually work around it. Now, the first one is, let's get it out of the way, is that the exercise doesn't fit you. Maybe it's the case that, you've tried it and you feel like it doesn't work. Now, this is a tricky one because it could be the case that it definitely does work for you. You're just fucking doing it wrong. But maybe you are doing it right, quote unquote, but it just doesn't work for you. So this might be difficult for you to assess. So let's have a talk about what we actually mean by this. Now, for example, you might want to work your quads. Therefore, you want to get to quadzilla status. And to get to quadzilla status, you've decided to squat. You're going to do some barbell back squats and you are going to squat the shit out of your program for the next 12 weeks or whatever it may be to build up some badass quads. Now, it is quite conceivable, depending on your own specific mechanics, that squat could be very glute and hip dominant and not very much quad involved. That is quite possible depending on your body's mechanics. And therefore, you could be doing lots and lots of squats, trying to build up your quads, but not actually seeing many results because for you, the mechanics of that exercise doesn't really work. And therefore, you could obviously just tweak that exercise. You could adjust that exercise so that it did. But you've got to first understand that why it doesn't work for you. For example, let's use an arbitrary example of, again, the squat. Maybe it's the case that you want to have some heel elevation. Maybe that is the solution to making it a bit more of a quad dominant squat. Or maybe it's reverting it to a front squat. Maybe a front squat for you makes it slightly more quad dominant, and therefore the exercise now suits you and suits the goal that you're trying to achieve. So there is this situation where you do have exercises that just merely won't fit you, but you really got to understand why, because if you understand why it doesn't fit you, then you can understand more about how you either adjust that exercise or what exercise you swap it out to. Because if you swap it out for another exercise that also doesn't fit you because you didn't really understand why the first one didn't, then you could just be going to this loop of just trying exercises and it all not quite working and all quite not clicking together as you really, really want. Now, the other thing you want to remember is that you don't have to do a specific exercise. You have to do some exercise if you want to build some muscle. You have to do some sort of movement, ideally with weights. But you don't have to do specific exercises, especially because the internet fucking tells you have to. Just because someone puts on social media that the best exercise for X is Y doesn't mean it's the best exercise for you. And that is a clear distinction. So really speaking, there is no best exercise, especially not best exercise for everyone. There really is the best exercise for you and your goal, or the best exercises, should I say. Now, that would be the case then. You don't have to deadlift. And I kind of think that deadlifting, especially from the floor, is very a kind of a popular thing on Instagram, social media. It's something to make a video about and put it online. Everyone does a little bit of a clicky, likey thing, love hearts and all that sort of shit. But actually, does it help you achieve your goal? Ask yourself, in your program, what benefit is the deadlift giving you that helps you achieve your goal? If you can answer that question and say, I'm doing the deadlift because it does this and this is what I want, great. But if you're just doing deadlifts because you're not really sure why and you're not really sure it meets your goal and actually it's causing you some pain and you're not quite sure whether you've got the mobility to do a full deadlift from the floor, question these things, change these things. Question the fact that you don't have to stick to any specific exercise if it doesn't fit you. I would always urge you to lose the connection between a specific exercise and maybe what you feel like you should be doing. At the end of the day, your muscles are the things that just need to be challenged. It just is a case of how can you create more tension on that muscle for a given number of repetitions. That's essentially, when you break it down, what you're trying to do. Your body doesn't really know what exercise you're doing. So if you can create the right stimulus from a particular exercise, who gives a fuck if a deadlift's in your program or not? Or who gives a fuck if a squat is in your program if you can get the required training stimulus from another exercise or maybe another 2 exercises or whatever, is you start to build a program that works for you, not is based on what sounds fucking cool on Instagram. That would be the first thing that I would say. So yes, an exercise might not work for you, but understand why. That's the key thing, is what is it about that exercise that's not really working for you? Then is it a case of tweaking that exercise so it does fit you? Or is it walking away and finding an exercise that does fit you and suits your goal at the same time? Now that might be a very difficult question for you to answer yourself if you're not too experienced, but they're the sorts of things you've got to start thinking about. The next thing would be your actual form. Now, incorrect execution of a particular exercise is going to basically make for ineffective results. Now, you can spend as much time as you like working on a specific exercise, doing number of sets, reps, whatever it may be. If the form is fucking awful, then arguably you're just wasting a whole bunch of time, when actually you need to spend more time focusing in on how to actually perform this exercise correctly. How do I execute it? How do I actually make sure I'm extracting the most amount of benefit from this? And you might feel like you're struggling with that exercise. It might be causing you some pain. It might be causing you a little bit of joint soreness because, again, the form isn't quite right. So that's kind of causing you to struggle with this exercise. Maybe it's a case that you're not being able to put more weight on the bar because you've been doing poor form for so long. You've got into this situation of, well, now I can't freaking compensate anymore by doing any other sorts of random movements, that now you've got this form issue that's preventing you from going any further. So I'd always say is that come back to square one. If you're struggling with a specific exercise, maybe you feel like you should be lifting more weight, but you're not, and you're not progressing on that exercise, strip it back, video yourself, look at your form, really analyze it and say, well, how can I improve this? Am I doing something that is potentially stopping me from progressing on this exercise? And am I doing something that's actually preventing me from moving forward? Ask yourself those questions and spend as much time trying to perfect that form as you do with trying to put weight on the bar. Because don't forget, if the form is better and you're creating more tension on that particular muscle, then that's also progressive overload. Progressive overload doesn't just happen from putting as much weight on the bar or picking up heavier dumbbells. It can be from better execution of an exercise. Now, the third reason why you might be struggling with an exercise is because it's just fucking hard. You might be at that situation where exercise might be new to you. Working out might be new to you, and you're not really sure about these feelings, these sensations, as how should this feel? You know, your lat cramping on some form of lat pull down, and you can kind of really squeeze it, and you're feeling that really, really tight contraction, and that kind of gives you some pain in a good way, but you're not used to that. And that feels difficult, that feels weird. So you then construe that to be, I'm struggling, or you kind of stop short of going any further, and then you struggle with that exercise, you don't improve. Now you've got to really kind of then look at that and say, well, sometimes I'm just gonna have to work fucking hard. I'm just gonna have to work through all of these different sorts of sensations and feelings and try to just progress by just working that bit harder. And obviously that's on the context and on the basis of the exercise fits and your form is good and you're not just ramming extra volume through a shit exercise for you and shit form. So it's just that kind of knowledge of, okay, do I just need to work harder? Am I just being a freaking pussy? Do I need to just fucking man up or woman up or whatever the vernacular is and just get on with it? So I would say they were the three main things that I would focus on if you feel like you're struggling with an exercise. Is it just the case you are struggling because it's hard work and you just need to put that hard work in and there's nothing wrong with that exercise, you just need to work that bit harder? Is it the fact that your form is a little bit crap, a little bit poo, and you need to really work on making that exponentially better so you can extract more from that particular exercise, but you can also remove any pain that you've got or anything like that that is kind of making it feel like you're struggling? And the other final point is it might not be the right exercise for you. So have a look at what it is that you are struggling with. And if it is the fact that this exercise just doesn't seem to work, you can't feel it in the target muscle, it might be the case that the exercise just doesn't work for you. And therefore, if that's the case, you might want to think about either adjusting, tweaking the setup of that exercise, or swapping it out for something completely fucking different.